Back to the Weekend Research Project with John Shear, David Peroto, and myself, Robert Gadomski. Now, we heard John's picks for the Democratic presidential candidates in 2016. I know the process has already started. David, who are your top three Republican candidates for 2016? Who do you want to be voting for and see a debate between in 2 to 3 years for the presidency?
I think Christie Rubio is the only way we're going to be able to win. I think that's going to be the way forward. Is a very, very strong candidate, very, very, strong morals. Rubio, let's face it, you take a look at what happened this year. How many people voted for Obama? And African Americans, 94%. How many people voted Latinos? 74%. I feel we're a very polarized country right now. Racism is a fact. No matter who it was or what it was, 94% of those people still voted for him. A lot of African Americans are not better off. When you take a look at the statistics, you're talking about 20+% of African Americans, from 25 to 30 are working right now. You take a look at, a lot of people.
The numbers have jumped since January 20,000.
You take a look at, the Latinos, the same thing. Not as worse, but they're in the 12 to 15% range. So, you're looking at people who are voting for someone that over 4 years didn't help them at all. They're worse off. They're paying more for everything, and they still have those votes. So I think you need to see a minority in Republicans just to be able to get some of the votes.
I think that's something we haven't spoken about yet. You say that our brand is dying and we don't have a constituency across the country. I look at these numbers of 94% to 0 African Americans for Barack Obama and the extremely high Hispanic numbers for Barack Obama. And then you look at the unemployment numbers and the breakdowns of it and whatnot. And young people vote for Barack Obama. Young people ages 21 to 32, college graduates, people in college, they're at 3% unemployment. So their lives have not gotten worse. Their lives have probably gotten a lot better over the last 4 years, over the Obama presidency.
Well, let's take a look at unemployment, all right? So let's see, it's 8%, which is the number the official number.
The real number, which
is around 11%. On top of that, if you take a look, 47.1 million people are on food stamps now. That's 22 million more than 2008, and we still have 4.5 million jobs to create to get back to 2008 levels. So that would take us 44 years at current every single month that we're getting. And we're going to see a lot of job cuts coming from the Obamacare. We're going to see a lot of job cuts coming from if they do carbon tax.
We saw some on Wednesday. We saw various people announce that they would be releasing jobs.
That was mostly for showmanship.
That
could have been because costs
taxes haven't gone up under Obama.
I will be the first one to say that.
They said that before. They were calling their bluff. It was not it had no basis in reality.
Of course it does. You're dealing with people's lives. You fire someone, that's going to deal with their life. That's going to deal with their family.
You're dealing with
not just a person. It's not.
You're dealing with regulations.
But the reason for them firing had no basis.
Of course it is.
You're dealing with regulations.
I just read a report on a restaurant. Obamacare is going to cost 25% of each one of their franchise buildings of their cash flow. It's going to crush them. I think it was Cracker Barrel.
But it hasn't been implemented yet. So fire somebody now is highly premature.
They fire them now because they're
first.
Before you have to pay the cost.
Yeah, fire now and worry about it later.
Well, I think
just like when we had the recession. Everyone got fired now, they worry about it later. Why do you think these companies are sitting on billions and trillions of dollars of cash? They're afraid. They know they're going to get taxed on it. They know they're going to have problems. They're keeping all their money.
Well, they want to put it more into executive pay. Look, I mean, corporate profits have increased under Obama. The stock market went from $7,000.
That's a bad thing.
Well, 7 to 13.
That's a bad thing.
Well,
that doesn't help anybody.
Let me quickly go into that.
10% of the country. It doesn't help me.
Well, let me quickly go into that before we go into our ballot initiatives discussion. Corporate profits are high because corporate tax rates are high. Because if you have a small business, and in order for it to grow, the tax rates on it are too high. Because corporations can pay taxes. They have loopholes that other ones don't. A pharmacy with 4,000 pharmacies across the country could do more than one on Cross Bay Boulevard. They have more loopholes, they have better lawyers, they have lobbyists. So when you say that corporate profits are through the roof, it's because small businesses have been on the decline, not just the last 4 years, maybe in the last 8 years.
Yeah, but Obama's tax reforms are going to leave, they don't apply to 98% of the small businesses out there.
Of course they do.
They don't. That's what the Congressional Budget Office said. They don't apply to 98% of small businesses.
Believing the CBO is pointless.
Well, I mean, that's what we have now too. We have Republicans who refuse to take any kind of, You can't listen to the tax policy convention. You can't listen, every time something doesn't conform to their pre-existing notion, it's, oh, we can't listen to that. You know, I don't really, that's the best estimates that we have. I mean, I don't believe that that's going to do anything. And here's the thing too, I don't believe in the idea that giving tax cuts to wealthy people is going to make them hire, because the reason they're not hiring is because there's no demand for it. If I have a restaurant, let's say I have a small restaurant, and before the recession it's operating at 100% capacity. Now it's operating at 15% capacity. Giving me a tax cut is not going to make me invest in that business because there's nobody coming to the business.
Give me a tax cut.
Give the tax cuts to the middle class people. They have more disposable income. They come to the restaurant. They buy. That spurs them.
Then I'll let give the tax cuts to everyone and let people make their own decisions.
Well, then don't complain about the deficit.
In a spot where the government should not be spending money. It's the people's money, not the government's. And you're right. You know what? Maybe if Joe Rich gets a tax cut, maybe he might not open up another restaurant. But maybe if there's a fear that his tax rates are going to go up, he might not close that restaurant. Or he might expand that restaurant. Or he might open up another restaurant.
It's not going to expand unless there's demand for it.
Let's be honest here. Let's look at when the last time this happened, right? 1970s, right? How did we get out of the 1970s? Growth. Actual growth. Real growth. Real companies doing real stuff.
Yeah, but if you're talking about the Reagan tax cuts, they led to a huge deficit later on that tanked the economy under George Bush Sr. And then Clinton came along. Well, actually, Bush Sr. had to raise the taxes, and then we had Clinton come in, and then the economy took off.
He created a bubble.
We're talking about
tech boom.
He created a bubble.
We're talking about, well,
Democrats like
Reagan.
Clinton probably was
so did Reagan.
very first person that probably caused the recession that we're in now.
Well, so did Reagan. Reagan caused a bubble
No,
too. It led to a deficit.
Reagan didn't sign Glass-Steagall.
But Reagan signed
no.
deregulation of a whole bunch of other things.
Which is,
I mean,
deregulate, okay, in a perfect world, deregulation, you should be deregulation, because you should be able to police yourself, right? You should, if you're a good person, you should be able to police yourself.
Yeah, but we saw how that worked in this recession. I mean,
Look at
hedge funds didn't self-police themselves too well. I mean,
hedge funds do their own thing. If they blow up, they blow up. No one stops them. There's no one gets sued for hedge funds. Hedge funds are run by a couple people, and they're with wealthy people.
Hedge funds are the ones taking these junk bonds, these junk investments, and putting them into the economy and selling them into every other district, every other realm of the economy, and then.
Let's go through a timeline of what happened, all right? So in 1999, 2000, we had the tech bubble, all right? That created a surplus, okay? So when we had a surplus, right, what happens? The U.S. government doesn't want to issue debt anymore. There's no reason to issue debt. Believe it or not, the U.S. government's the biggest debt, issuer in the world. Everyone loves our debt. We have the highest credit rating, people are debt. So what does that happen? What happens is that people like other agency bonds, such as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, have created more demand. If there are people out there that don't have credit, there's no demand for it. They need to make that demand up. On top of that, Clinton got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act, which made travelers and Citigroup come together.
What was a Republican House that was pushing for that?
And it was a Democratic president that signed it.
He's the captain of the ship. You're the person that signs it. He's the one who did it.
Yeah, but it was the Republican ideology that drove him to sign it. I mean, he was working with the Republican House. You can't take, when Republicans often take credit for that economic expansion as well, and then they say, well, we don't have to blame for any liabilities. But Reagan created just as much of a bubble too.
We take credit for the Bush tax cuts in 2003 that spurred the economy.
But every time Republicans propose deregulation, lower taxes, and they're going to somehow lower spending, it never works. You never lower the spending to the point, and you just lower the revenue, and you make it impossible to raise taxes.
That's because you have establishment candidates that take their pork, and they don't cut when they promise to. They just run.
Pork is a very
small amount. We're talking. I mean, we have major issues, but the thing is, at the very least, Democrats tell you they're going to pay for it. Republicans just say.
No, Democrats don't tell you they're going to pay for it. Democrats tell you the wealthy people are going to pay for it.
They say how we're going to pay for it. Republicans tell you.
No, they tell you they're going to pay for it.
We're going to reduce taxes. We're going to reduce taxes. We're going to decrease spending, but we really increase it. And then we're going to somehow lower the deficit. And it never happens. It never happens.
Well, that was one of my issues with Bush, that he didn't decrease spending and whatnot during his years. I think he spent like a liberal. The tax cuts should have been at least some point paid for. But we have this argument all the time where liberals enjoy forgetting the fact that post 9/11, when the United States was coming right out of the tech bubble burst, that 46 to 48 straight months of job growth. That's a little fact liberals don't like to speak about.
A lot of that is also government job. A lot of that was government job growth. We had all of the subcontractors, Blackwater, all of those, they were all hired. Bush grew the size of the federal government, Obama and shrunk it actually. Much of that was actually if the federal government had been hiring at the same rate that it did under Bush, unemployment would be 1 or 2% lower than it is now. I mean,
You can't have an economy of government jobs. You
No.
can't have an economy of the government paying the government back.
you can't. But I think
Doesn't make sense.
But I'm just saying, the Republican ideology that they're going to shrink government and they're going to lower taxes, it never materializes. Reagan said the same thing: increase the size of the government, increase the deficit. It never happens. So I'm sorry, but I don't like agreeing to an ideology, trying to be explained to an ideology that has no proven track record.
So Obama has now run $1 trillion deficit plus every year for the last 4 years. It's most likely going to continue to do that as well. So what's the difference? There's no difference.
Well, because I think at least
And then let's look at 4 years from now, right? Right now, what do we spend 70% of our budget on? 3 things:
military.
healthcare, military, and Social Security. Right? And then if you take a look at the military budget, a quarter of that budget actually goes to veterans and aid too as well. So you really can't, say it's all going to, whatever people think it is.
Well, look, I'm not saying that Democrats should just raise taxes and that's the only solution.
Well, we
I think
can
we have to.
we could tax wealthy people 100%. You could tax everybody in this country 100%.
He's only asking for a restoration of Clinton level.
What's that do?
2 or 3% higher.
What does that do?
But we can also cut look, when the debt's in
Let's cut the defense budget in half right now. Boom, right? And now let's also raise taxes 3%. Okay, so we're still running at what, $400, $500 billion deficit, correct?
Well, I'm not 100% on numbers, but I would.
It's somewhere along those lines it would be.
But I'm just saying.
And then let's say now every year we have to increase that healthcare cost and our Social Security because we have an aging population. So every day you have 10,000 people retiring. So how is that going to help?
Well, how is cutting taxes going to help with that?
At least we can get some growth.
But that's assuming that there is growth. The Congressional Research Service had a report that said there is no correlation between cutting taxes and growth. There just isn't. And look, maybe it'll hurt us in the short term, but we need to build a long-term economy. Businesses aren't going to locate here if we don't have the proper infrastructure.
Well, my simple reasoning for cutting taxes, besides the fact that number one, it's people's money. When your taxes get cut, it's your money. When your taxes get cut, it's your money. It's my money. I created it. I worked for it. I earned it, and I should be able to spend it, and not the government should be able to spend it. Is that the economic formula of total income minus expenses equals disposable income? Most economists say that once the disposable income of people goes up, that's how you get yourself out of a recession, because there's more demand for restaurants and whatnot. There's more things that people can buy. You put money into people's hands, they will spend it. Now, I'm sorry we have to cut you both short here. My 3 candidates for 4 years from now are going to be Chris Christie. I think he's shown to be a leader. I think he's worked with unions and a Democratic legislator in Jersey, one of the most successful states in the country. Marco Rubio, if we're talking about demographic shifts, I think he's perfect. I also think Marco Rubio made one of the best speeches at the Republican convention. I also think his suit was nicer than Paul Ryan's. I think he would have been a stronger candidate. I think he's a better orator. And he might be a Tea Party candidate, but I just think deep down he's one of the strongest ones. Governor Scott Walker, whenever there's been a chance to vote for him, he won seats in the legislative elections 2 years later, and he won seats this year. Governor Scott Walker is probably one of the most successful governors in the country. And if you're looking at on the Democratic side, I think you have Andrew Cuomo. I think you may have Hillary Clinton. You could have a Joe Biden. I'm also looking at Mr. Castro, the mayor of San Antonio right now. I think he's a rising star in the Democratic Party, made the second-class keynote address on Tuesday night of the Democratic Convention. I think he would be a good candidate. But we're going to take a little break. We'll be right with you. We're going to talk about ballot initiatives and then my one-on-one interview with David Peroto on the market.